हेलो। हाँ बताइए। हाँ मॉर्निंग बताइए।
साउंड नहीं आ रही है सर।
स्टार्ट हुई सर मीटिंग।
Okay, so let's begin. Good morning to everybody, please. And those of you who have a problematic internet connection today, you have my sympathy because I am in the same boat. My chamber Wi-Fi is unfortunately out of whack. So yeah, I think that we will be, if you have any problems in the meantime, just write in the chat because I may not be able to hear you if there is any problem with my internet. Is that okay? If there's any issue, just write in the chat. That might be better in case I cannot hear you. I am audible, right?
Okay. Audible, sir.
Okay, great. Now let me share my screen very quickly. ठीक ठीक ठीक. Sorry for that interruption. Okay, is my screen visible to everyone, please? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now let us begin. And we are beginning a little later than I'd anticipated. So I will have to move a little quickly forward in the initial part. See, I think that there were a number of you during the in the beginning of the course who wanted to cover management certifications, right? There were many people who wanted to learn more about these various certifications for EnHM. Can somebody just quickly tell me which of these certifications or which particular points you had in mind? Which particular certification or which particular, like, was it ISO, was it Green Co, was it IRIS, was it something else?
Sir, about consent to operate regarding NGT.
National Green Tribunal.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then anything else?
Green Co.
And the Green Co certification.
Okay.
ISO 14001.
ISO 14001. Okay. Then
ISO 50001 energy certificate.
okay, I've just tried to open a poll here on WebEx about which certification you would like to look at. If you have the time, just you can answer that poll. In the meantime, let's move forward. And yes, you are right that those are mainly the certifications that we'll be looking at. We will. Achha, by the way, is everybody more comfortable in English or is everyone more comfortable in Hindi? अगर कोई हिंदी में ज़्यादा अगर कोई चाहता है कि हिंदी में क्लास हो तो हिंदी में भी पढ़ा सकते हैं, कोई दिक्कत की बात नहीं.
English, sir.
English. Okay. One other request is please interact during this class. Otherwise it can become very one way, and then neither I am helped because I do not know about your problems, and neither are you helped because I will be talking about something that is not relevant to you. So please interact. So before we start with actually what certifications are, before we start with individual certifications and what they are, let's talk about the background of certifications, the philosophy of the certification, and that is best explained through something called the turtle diagram, which you see before you, which is basically a way. Where are my annotations? So, which is basically a way of representing any particular process, right? It is a way of representing any particular any kind of black box, which is to say that any process, which in this case over here is the this thing right here. That is to say, it is a process of value addition, basically, involving certain activities. This is not something that is visible to anybody outside. Outside, what we have two halves. We have the supplier and we have the receiver. The supplier is basically the place from which is basically the previous workstation, and the receiver is the next workstation. So in the context of, let us say, a workshop, this can be if your process is, let us say, air brake overhauling, then your supplier will be the previous shop. That is to say, in this case, the stripping shop or the dismantling area or the bogie shop, and your receiver will be ideally the assembly shop, which is to say bogie assembly or coach fitting and assembly section. So it is not necessary, but in general, what we're talking about is the perspective of the receiver. That is to say, the customer. So, for example, we in the mechanical department, our customer, as far as coaching design is concerned, is the railway passenger, right? That is our customer. For somebody else, our customer will be maybe something else. But as far as we are concerned, our customer is the railway passenger. That's why we deal with, for example, things like passenger complaints, and that's why we take them so seriously. Manoj, you want to ask something? Go ahead.
Actually, sir, I'm not able to answer the poll, sir. Sir, can you please tell me the process, how to write?
Okay, in that case, let us just close the poll because I think that there is some issue over here. And just tell me verbally which one you want,
Sir, regarding Greenco and sir, energy conservation 50,001 ISO.
Thank you. We'll be covering both in this class. Don't worry. Thank you. Okay. So as I was saying, the supplier is the place from which it comes. The receiver is the place to which it goes. And for us in the mechanical department, our receiver is the railway passenger. That much is a given. That much is something that nobody has any confusion on. Now, in any context, in any kind of black box process that maybe you do not know about, you know the inputs that are involved. You know the outputs that you can expect. Any process will involve the expenditure of resources, material, that is to say. So that is one aspect. Any process will always require the involvement of some trained personnel. That is what we are doing here in this course with all of you today. We are developing our personnel, and we are looking after the training needs, right? Then there will always be certain amount of documentation associated with it. What kind of work is being done, or what kind of processes are being followed, they need to be documented. So, for example, if you are looking at, for example, any kind of, for example, Kastner bogie overhaul in a wagon shop, or let us say something even more specific, something like CTRV overhauling. It is a very specific technical process, and therefore it will have to have its own documented procedure. There will have to be some kind of work instruction. Some kind of WI will be necessary. So that is as far as the documentation is concerned. But all of these things that I have enclosed in red, these that is to say the process itself, of course, the technical details of the process itself, the documentation or the work instruction, the resources that you are using, mostly the training of the personnel or the skills of the personnel, all of these things are basically behind a wall. They're not something that can be seen. They're not something that any company or that any organization, railway, whether it is railways, whether it is some private company, whether it is some foreign government, no agency, no organization, that is to say, no process owner will ever allow you to see the details of that particular will ever allow you to see these details, because that process owner is deploying his own risk and his own and is looking for his own opportunities or her own opportunities. So this thing about the process owner allowing these things that are in red to become public is out of the question. So how does this person or anybody, how does this person, how does the receiver understand what he is getting? And how does the supplier, that is to say this person, how does this guy know what he is, who his customers are, or what he is giving it to? So both of these things then become question marks. And so, for example, if you go and you want to you use, let us say, a GeoSIM for your CUG, your GeoSIM will how that SIM is operated is based again on a certain process. It is owned by Geo, right? Geo has taken certain risks by giving you low prices, by entering the market when it was already saturated, etc., etc. And it has deployed certain procedures, certain resources, and by certain trained personnel in order to give you that resource. You as the receiver cannot ask Geo कि भाई मुझे बताओ कि कहाँ है आपका signal and कैसे आपके towers काम कर रहे हैं. Unless the company chooses to make that information public, which by the way it is completely at liberty not to. All that you have, the only thing that you have at your disposal to look at is this. In fact, let's take a different color. The only thing that you have to look at is these performance indicators. This is your only thing, or your only point that is visible. And that is why these become very important. This is what the receiver will be looking at. This is also what the supplier will be looking at. And this is also, in fact, what the process owner will also be looking at, because in many cases, the process owner may not be himself aware of all the technical parameters that go into any one particular process under him or under her. And your customers will definitely be looking at these performance indicators, right? So what do these performance indicators indicate? They indicate the health of the system. These performance indicators indicate the health of the system. For different organizations, of course, you have different performance indicators. For example, in a school, the performance indicator is generally the board exam. That do these students who are studying in the school, do they do well in the boards on average overall, or do they have a lot of third divisions and a lot of failures and other difficulties? Similarly, the performance indicator of let us say you here in the railways might be, for example, passenger complaints. How many passenger complaints have you received for a particular coach or for a particular route in, let us say, the last 1 month? And in general, for any technical process, these performance indicators have to be standardized and certified. These performance indicators have to be, let me type that right here. They have to be standardized and certified. And this is something, in fact, and this is something that you and I are doing in the form of, management certifications. So what are you doing when you are the receiver? As the receiver, you are optimizing your output, you are optimizing your investment, you are optimizing your judgment, basically, based on this, based on these on certain standardized performance indicators, which are nothing but certifications. So to put it another way, let's type it up here. Certifications are nothing but standardized forms of, or standardized performance indicators, not even standardized forms. They are standardizations of performance indicators. Everyone clear so far? Any questions so far? Anyone? Great. Let's move on. So what about certifications in the railways? When you go and you buy, for example, something from, if you want to go out and buy a new mobile phone, you will give a higher priority to things like, to brands like, for example, Apple, or let us say Samsung, or LG, or Motorola, because these are brands that are well recognized. They are well recognized because they have a certain market standing. They have a certain standard value. They have a certain standard brand image, and that is because on the international standards that exist for things like mobile phones, like for example Canadian FCC regulations, the certifications are they are top certified. They are top level recognized. The railways, unfortunately, until recently, did not have a brand image, which is why back in 2016, when the then MRS, Mr. Ravindra Gupta, pushed very hard for the railways to get various management certifications in various different fields, including the environment, energy conservation, occupational health and safety, wealth quality, railway as a railway supplier, railway standard specifications, cleanliness, performance, quality. In every aspect, the certifications were pushed for, and this is what that class or that presentation is about. Let's see how much we can cover in the next one hour plus. So first and foremost, we have the green certification, which is also called the Green Co certification. That was started by the railways through an MOU with CII Godrej, with CII in July 2016. and which is basically a threefold or three-part certification. You have the Green Co certification itself, you have the Green Building certification, and you have the Green Railway Station rating. So, okay. So as I was saying, we have the Green Co. Sorry. This green certification is basically in three parts. You have of course, the Green Co. We we have the Green Co. Right? We have Green Building. And we have the Green Railway Station. And all these three certifications come under the broad umbrella of the green certification, but we will discuss them separately. So, what is the green certification? The green certification looks at any one particular industry or industrial unit, and it assesses that industry or that industrial unit on various parameters, at least 8 different parameters, and sometimes 10. And based on this is their assessment is in the form of a score, in the form of a marks given out of 100 or 125 or 150. It's a weighted average basically, and that weighted average should come to a minimum of 35% for certification. But this is not considered a very good level. It is not considered a very useful level. So the national best will have will be something between 65 and 75% marks, and that is the gold level Green Co certification. Above which we have platinum, which is considered world class. Each of these is given a particular. Each of these headings has a particular weightage or has a particular set of requirements. Let me just show you what I mean. Just one second. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, visible.
Okay. So, for example, you have the energy efficiency, which is out of 150. This, by the way, is the Green Co pamphlet that we got in Izatnagar workshop from CII direct. So, and I'm sure many of you must have seen this already. So, I'll go through this very quickly, and if you want, I can share it with you as well on the course page. So, energy efficiency, which is 150 points, which is, by the way, very similar to ISO 50001, is it has certain like every requirement, it has certain mandatory requirements. In this case, an energy policy and energy management cell with an energy manager, and then it has certain credits, some of which are rated even higher than the mandatory requirements. So, for example, employee involvement and capacity building, or for example, an energy monitoring system, or for example, specific energy consumption is a very, very important 100-point credit requirement. So, in which you can look at, for example, SSC reductions or benchmarking, etc., etc. Renewable energy is 100 points. And we can see again, it has certain mandatory requirements. So, for example, an energy policy is mandatory, but then it has certain credits which are, like, for example, offsetting of electrical and thermal energy sources, which is 65 points out of 100. So 65% of this credit is just the offsetting of both electrical and thermal power sources. Then renewable energy generation on site within the industry or within the factory. Then you have the greenhouse gas requirement, which is 125 points, which involves inventorization of greenhouse gases, of course, because that is the most important aspect of greenhouse gases. आपको पता होना चाहिए कि आपकी greenhouse gases कहाँ से आ रही हैं. You have to know where they are coming from, and therefore you have to inventorize their sources. From burning of diesel fuel, we are getting this much. From our automobile commutes, we're getting this much. From our road crane, we're getting this much. And from our shot blasting plant, it is so much is being generated, etc., etc. Energy. Then you have to set again targets for employee involvement, targets for short-term, medium-term, and long-term reductions, and an internal and a intensity reduction, right? Followed by things like, for example, a carbon neutral approach in which you can look for buying carbon credits, or a reduction of by inventory, an inventorized reduction, that is to say. Each of these is a more ambitious target than is a bigger target or a more ambitious target than the previous. And then we have water conservation. Water conservation is, again, it involves things like, for example, having a water manager and a water policy, which is as we can see, it is a mandatory requirement. Then again, we can see a pattern. Every credit requires employee involvement. Every credit requires a certain policy and a certain person to look after that policy, because that is the only way work gets done, right? It is if you appoint a person to ensure that things happen. Then rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting, most of you would have developed or would be trying to develop some kind of rainwater harvesting plant. Partly because it is a technical requirement these days, but also because it is a great thing to do. It is a great thing to have. Then augmentation of groundwater, that is to say groundwater recharge, right? That is water conservation, 100 points. Similarly, we have waste management, again, inventorization, reduction of solid, liquid, and gaseous waste, and sewage. Then you have material conservation, which again, involves things like, for example, usage of recycled material, reduction in packaging material, biodegradability of the product, as well as the materials that we are using, that we're allocating to it. Which now, green supply chain is something I would really like to point out to all of you, because green supply chain is especially interesting. Green supply chain basically ensures that any industry, for example, any workshop looking to take Green Co certification, must put pressure on its suppliers along its supply chain, that is to say, all its vendors, all its contractors, all its suppliers, up the stream, and to its customers, and to its various subordinate units down the stream, to optimize their supply chain, or to optimize their supply facility for maximum environmental efficiency. So, for example, our critical suppliers, have they been the environmental aspects of critical suppliers, or the targets adopted for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in things like transportation or packaging or storage? Then, somebody wants to ask something?
Yes, sir.
Somebody wants to ask something?
Yes, sir. I want to ask something, sir.
Mohit, go ahead, please.
सर मैं ये जानना चाहता हूँ कि मैं हिंदी में बात करूँ, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है सर?
कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, प्लीज बोलिए।
तो हम चाहते हैं कि जो हमारा सप्लायर है, सप्लायर से क्या मैं सर मटेरियल जो मंगाता हूँ उनसे भी, उनको भी सप्लायर बोलेंगे हम, जिनसे मैं मटेरियल खरीदता हूँ रेलवे में।
जी 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 जी, उनको आप सप्लायर कहेंगे जी।
हाँ, तो उनसे भी मैं आशा करता हूँ कि वो उसी तरह का पैकेजिंग और ये सब चीजें मतलब उसमें इंक्लूड करें। लेकिन सर वो सब जो होता है वो एज पर जीसीसी होता है, तो क्या हमारा जीसीसी से मैच है ENHM या इस तरह का कोई गाइडलाइन है कि वो जीसीसी में आ जाए और उसी हिसाब से अपना काम करे कॉन्ट्रैक्टर या सप्लायर जो भी है?
नहीं मोहित, आप जीसीसी को ये जीसीसी को आप पैकेजिंग से या जीसीसी को सप्लाई को अपने ट्रांसपोर्टेशन से जोड़ के क्यों देख रहे हैं? जीसीसी में ऐसा क्या है जो कि जिससे कि आप नहीं कर सकते इस चीज को?
नहीं सर, उसको हम स्पेशली तो कुछ बोलते नहीं ना, उसमें सामान देना है, वो पता नहीं किस हिसाब से पैकेजिंग करे, क्या उसमें यूज करे, वो कोई देखता नहीं है एक्चुअली।
तो मोहित, वो आपके स्पेशल कंडीशन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में तो आप डाल ही सकते हैं ना उस चीज को।
हाँ,
जीसीसी
वही
थोड़ी
मैं
ना
जानना चाहता हूँ, वो डालना
जीसीसी
पड़ेगा।
थोड़ी ना ऐसी कोई जीसीसी ऐसी थोड़ी ना कोई चीज है जो कि आप जो कि जहां से शुरू हुई और जहां पे खत्म हुई उसी के बीच में हम लोगों को सिमट के रह जाना है। जीसीसी वो जनरल कंडीशंस हैं जिसमें कि आप जिसमें कि आप जिसके दायरे के अंदर आप काम कर सकते हैं अगर आपको कोई और फ्रेमवर्क नहीं मिला, और जो कि काफी काफी हद तक रेलवे इंटरेस्ट में बहुत सारी चीजों को कवर कर लेती है, जो कि शायद हम लोग बार बार लिख नहीं सकते या बार बार सोच नहीं सकते हर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के लिए। तो इसलिए हम लोग जीसीसी लिख देते हैं। अच्छा, जीसीसी के जो सारे जो क्लॉजेस हैं वो ENHM में भी अप्लाई करेंगे, क्योंकि जीसीसी में कहीं ये नहीं लिखा है कि आपको फलानी तरह से सप्लाई करना है, या आपको फलानी तरह से ट्रांसपोर्टेशन करना है, या आपको फलानी तरह से अपना अपनी करनी है। वो चीजें आप नहीं लिखें तो भी यू आर एट लिबर्टी। आप लिखें तो भी यू आर एट लिबर्टी। जीसीसी का इससे कोई लेने देने नहीं। इसमें आप ये कर सकते हैं। हम लोग जब इज्जतनगर वर्कशॉप में थे और हम लोग ने जब ये किया था इस सर्टिफिकेशन को, तो इसको हम लोगों ने कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कंडीशंस में नहीं लाए थे। हम लोग कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कंडीशंस में इसको रखना थोड़ा सा मुश्किल इसलिए भी हो जाता है क्योंकि फिर हमारे कभी कभी हमारे रेट हायर हो जाते हैं, या कुछ अगर हमें कोई सामान मंगाना है सपोज के दिल्ली से, तो वो दूर सप्लायर गया तो फिर उनको लगता है कि उनका बहुत लॉस हो जाएगा सप्लाई करने में। इसलिए आप इसको हार्ड एंड फास्ट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के तौर पे भले ही नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन आप इसको ये क्या कहते हैं, एनवायरमेंटल फुटप्रिंट को कम करने के लिए आप अपनी सप्लाई चेन प्रोसेस को आप चेंज कर सकते हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल ये क्या कहते हैं, इज्जतनगर में एक दिक्कत थी कि हम लोगों के पास जब भी हम लोग को दिक्कत होती थी, हम लोग एक अर्जेंसी पे एक ऑर्डर डालते थे LT पे, राइट। एंड वो जो ऑर्डर था वो फिर एक जनरली एक पार्ट क्वांटिटी में आता था। तो पार्ट क्वांटिटीज काफी सारी हम लोग के पास आ रही थी, या फिर हम लोग कहते थे कि भाई वो जो कवर्ड जो PO है हेडक्वार्टर का, उसमें से अगर 10,000 यूनिट का PO है, प्लीज उसमें से कम 2,000 यूनिट तो अभी दे जाओ, हमारे 2 महीने का काम चल जाएगा।
जी।
ठीक है, तो उससे हम लोग की एंड वो बार बार वही सप्लायर भेजता था अपने ट्रक में लाद के। तो फिर हम लोगों ने सप्लायर को एक हेडक्वार्टर के थ्रू सप्लायर को लेटर लिखा कि भाई आप लोग जो हैं आप पार्ट क्वांटिटीज में हम लोगों को में सप्लाई ना करके, अगर कैसा रहेगा अगर आप बिगिनिंग ऑफ द ईयर में या कोई भी एक PO पढ़ने के बाद एक निर्धारित समय पे 3 महीने बाद 4 महीने बाद आप 100% क्वांटिटी एक बार में लाके हमारे डिपो में डिलीवर कर दीजिए, सो दैट आपकी जो ट्रक्स हैं वो पूरा मुरादाबाद सॉरी पूरा ये उनका वेयरहाउस जो था गाजियाबाद से आपको बार बार ना भेजनी पड़े, एक बार में आ जाए, और फिर उसके बाद फिर हम लोग की इंटरनल मूवमेंट होगी विद इन द वर्कशॉप फ्रॉम स्टोर्स डिपो टू दिस थिंग। तो एक आध सप्लायर्स नहीं मान पाए थे, एक आध सप्लायर्स मान गए, तो इन द नेट वी रिड्यूस्ड आवर एनवायरमेंटल फुटप्रिंट। तो इसको आप जीसीसी से जोड़ के मत देखिए, ठीक है मोहित? थैंक यू। Anybody else has any other questions, please?
So regarding this GHG intensity emission measurement, how we will do that? I mean, it's
GHG intensity यहाँ पे this
we need to maintain measure the GHG intensity of that workshop, like workshop or production unit. And
yes, so this is basically specific emissions. So for example, you can measure the GHG intensity. You already know from this inventorization, you already know, even if it is just an estimate, but you know where you have which are the GHG heavy areas in your industry, right? And a lot of it, because you have so many railway workshops, even if your workshop has not done it, some other workshop will definitely have done it. आपको मिल जाएगा, ठीक है? So then within that, you can talk about, for example, emission per hour or emission per day, right? So or emission per coach. What is the greenhouse gas emissions per unit POH, like per VU, per coach or per wagon or per loco, whatever. That is GHG emission intensity. So you can actually you and then again notice ये तो काफी पुराना है, ये 2017 की डॉक्यूमेंट है, लेकिन इसलिए 2016 से 2020, लेकिन बेसिकली फॉर द नेक्स्ट 5 years कम से कम 5 साल का आपको एक एक्शन प्लान बना के रखना है, एंड देन दैट एक्शन प्लान इज व्हाट यू लुकिंग फॉर इन द शॉर्ट टर्म. GHG emission intensity is basically, it is a 5-year action plan as a short term. So does that answer your question? Or you were saying how do we measure it? क्या कह रहे थे आप?
I'm talking about how to measure that intensity. I mean, it's
वही मैं बोल रहा हूँ. Okay, fine. Praveen, what I am saying is that कि आपको पता है कि आपके कितनी total emissions हो रहे हैं आपके यहाँ से, because of the estimates that have already been made, or because of the estimates that you yourself can do within your workshop or within your shed or unit. वो total per unit coach or per unit wagon POH or per day, whether you're looking at work intensity or whether you're looking at time intensity, that is your GHG emission intensity. मैं ही कह रहा हूँ. अब आप कह रहे हैं कि इन्वेंटराइजेशन कैसे करेंगे, तो हेलो,
yes sir.
हाँ, मैं कह रहा हूँ अगर आप ये कह रहे हैं कि इन्वेंटराइजेशन कैसे करेंगे, तो इन्वेंटराइजेशन तो you can always do it, because you know which machines are running, you know which are the areas or मतलब where you are consuming power, right? Whether it is a DG, whether it is a electric power, whether it is a engine, right? Diesel fired engine, whether it is, आपको पता है कि आप कहाँ power use कर रहे हो, right? Electric power, diesel power, anything. So if you know where you are using power, then those become the locations of greenhouse gas emission. Then you know the greenhouse gas. It is standard data available online. You know the greenhouse gas that is being emitted in any particular mode. So for example, if it is a diesel generator, suppose करिए, तो जैसे कि हम लोग के पास एक वो DG सेट से अपना शॉर्ट ब्लास्टिंग प्लांट चलाता था, राइट? तो वो कॉन्ट्रैक्टर का वो मैकेनिज्म था, अपना खुद का DG सेट लाता था, खुद का डीजल लाता था, खुद अपनी शॉर्ट ब्लास्टिंग प्लांट चला के शॉर्ट ब्लास्टेड बोगीज हमको देता था. तो दैट इज, हम लोग को पता है कि डीजल जलाने से कितना GHG आता है. मैं भूल रहा हूँ अभी वैल्यू, लेकिन इट इज सम किलोज, some 100 kilos per day or something. That is GHG emission for diesel. Then, for example, आप ये हम लोग के पास एक Mr. Tandelu, I'll just come to you in one second. आपको पता है, then for example, अगर आपके पास कोई इलेक्ट्रिक यूनिट है, तो इलेक्ट्रिक यूनिट में फॉर एग्जांपल शॉप में आपके पास एक इलेक्ट्रिकली पावर्ड ईओटी क्रेन है, तो उसको रन करने में it takes so many kilowatts of power. So therefore, GHG emission associated with consumption of so many kilowatts of electric power is XYZ. उस तरह से आप इन्वेंटराइज करके आप ऐड कर सकते हैं. ठीक है प्रवीण?
Okay sir.
And you do not need to do this yourself in many cases, because in many cases some other workshop will have done it for you, especially if it is like a commonly available or commonly used process. Mr. Tandelu, please go ahead.
Sir, my question is, all these parameters, whether it is energy efficiency or water conservation or waste management, has some maximum points.
Yes, absolutely.
Sir, is there any provision of minimum points for that? इतना आना ही आना है, इससे कम नहीं होना चाहिए.
देखिए, ये जो आपका this is a question that we also asked the Green Co team, the audit team, when they had come. तो उन्होंने कहा था that they want a minimum of 35% each, right? So, for example, like we were failing others over here, which is 100 points. Others is basically green innovations. So, ultimately, we were getting something like 30 out of 100 in this area in others. And so the audit team actually asked us, please provide us some things that you have done. So basically, ultimately, it became our presentation on innovations. So ultimately, we were able to add these 40 points. But when it was 30, they did not, out of 100, they did not accept it. So even though it is not written in their rules, but they do not actually accept anything below 35% in any credit. Hello, Mr. Tandelu?
Yes, sir. Sir, clear, sir.
As I said, below they do not accept anything below 35% in any credit. And the reason for that, in fact, is and the reason for that, Mr. Tandelu, is this, because their minimum certified level is 35%. So I think that is the reason.
Thank you very much, sir. My doubt is clear.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Anyone else has any other questions, please? Anyone? Go ahead. Okay. So then we come to the other part of the green co or the green certification, which is green building and green railway station. Now, green building is basically a way of building management or construction management. It is basically a form of architecture to, as it is written here, to reduce or eliminate negative environmental impacts while remaining user friendly. This is something that I've not written on the slide, but basically a building that is abandoned will of course have less environmental impact than let us say a functional office building. But a building must eliminate its negative environmental impact while remaining user friendly, while remaining productive for its intended use, to be called a green building, right? So a green building is basically that this rating. It is again in the same way as the green rating. It is certified bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. So the green building rating is administered by the Indian Green Building Council. But one thing that I just wanted to point out to you is that the Indian Green Building Council is not an exclusively Indian body. This Indian that you see over here, this Indian word that you see over here, this is not entirely true, or this is not entirely absolutely. It is not an indigenous. It is not an indigenous rating, because we have several other green building councils. We have, for example, the Malaysian Green Building Council, or the Japan Green Building Council, or the Swiss Green Building Council, or the French Green Building Council, or the South African Green Building Council. We have so many other green building councils, and each of these green building councils is administered by. Each of these green building councils is actually administered by the WGBC. Which is the, sorry, something went wrong. So it is administered by the WGBC, which is the World Green Building Council. I think it's in New York, in the US, which mandates that which mandates the standards that each green building council has to maintain and certify. So basically, it is not a national certification; it is an international certification, or an international standard of certification for green buildings across the world. And the Indian Green Building Council is no different. So, any questions, by the way, before I move on to the next slide? Okay. So and we can see that in fact, the first green building to be certified in India was Edison Pune. Was the main academic block, the academic building of Edison Pune, which received a platinum level green building certification.
Sir, excuse me. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, what are the parameters actually we have to maintain main specifications to say this as it is a green building? Main parameters.
The main parameters, Mr. Davangare, are the same as for the Green Co, but they are assessed in a different way. They are you are looking at the same parameters that is to say, but because it is a building that has already been built, therefore therefore it is you cannot look at it in the same way as a workshop. So, for example, energy efficiency in a building will look very different from energy efficiency in a workshop. Or, for example, greenhouse gas emission in a building will look very different from greenhouse gas emission in a workshop. But effectively, it is the same. It is the same thing. You are looking at maximum renewable energy consumption, with maximum percentage of renewable energy in the green building. That is to say, reduction of ACs, reduction of lights, reduction of electrical cooling equipment or heating equipment, use of natural light, use of cross ventilation, and the like. Then, for example, you're looking at, for example, water conservation. So, of course, no water should be leaking, but also things like, for example, self-closing taps that are, electronic water sensors, so that nobody can leave a tap on by mistake. Then you're looking at, for example, green waste disposals, for example, landfill on the site, or a compost, at least a compost pit within the premises of the building, so that all the waste can be processed internally for biodegradability. Then things like, for example, green waste disposal. So, for example, you have plastics, you have polythenes, you have various other packaging materials. So that should be disposed of in an eco-friendly manner. It should not be disposed of to a company that is just incinerating it. And then you have, for example, green supply chain within the buildings. For example, one way to, for example, in an office building, if I need to send some piece of information to the next room, or to the next office, one possibility that I take a printout or take a scan copy, and I send it in, and I send that paper over to the next office or to the next building. The other option is that I send an email or a WhatsApp. So basically, a paperless office would be a good step. All of these things, the credits remain the same, but their assessment parameters or their assessment paradigm becomes different. Is that okay, Mr. Davangare?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Similarly, we have the Green Railway Station rating, which is very recent. It is just in 2019 or 2020, in fact, just before COVID. And then COVID delayed the whole process for 2 years. So, which is why it is now being newly done for the last, not even 1 year, in the last 7 months, 7-8 months, that we are looking at green railway stations coming up after COVID. So otherwise, you have certain green railway stations, like, for example, Lucknow Northeastern, LJN railway station is green certified, but then that got certified just before COVID in late 2019. So the CII, what happened is that the CII, IGBC, because the IGBC is also part of the CII. So the CII-IGBC came up with a certain set of standards in consultation with the Environment Directorate of the Railway Board to modify the green building standards to fit the railway station. So again, a green railway station is a station that is environmentally sustainable, but which also has a good customer experience, and the customer is of course the passenger, right? So the customer experience must not be hampered by the reduction of environmental impacts of the green railway station. Just recently, near here in Jamalpur, we have the Asansol railway station, which has been platinum certified. But we have other railway stations across India that are quite large and which are quite which have achieved quite a good rating, like Victoria Terminus, which is now Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, which is of Central Railway, is gold certified. Again, our focus on green certification is of course on environmental friendliness and cost reduction, energy saving, but it is also these last 3 points are just as important as the first 3. First and foremost, yes, any certification, not just GreenCo, but any certification does result in a better overall performance, simply because of the new techniques, the new training, the new technical assistance, the new processes, the hand-holding that is provided by the certification agent. So that is one thing. The second thing is that it drives innovation within the organization because of employee involvement. And image building is enhanced. Because ultimately what you're doing all this for, what you're doing things like any kind of certification, whether it's green certification or ISO or IRIS or Six Sigma, all of these are basically we're doing it for, among many other things, for image. Any questions, anyone? This is as far as GreenCo certification is concerned. I will now move on to ISO very quickly. Anyone, any questions, please? Okay. Thank you.
It would be better if you share all the parameters required for GreenCo certification, sir.
Yeah, sure. I'll share that. I'll share that on the course page. I generally share that in every EnHM course. I'll share it with you as well. No issue. No issue. Now let's come very quickly to ISO 14001. Now all ISOs are quite similar to each other. So which is why I will explain 14001 in a little more detail, and then 50001 I will go through it quicker. So ISO 14001 is basically, it is, okay, first and foremost, all ISOs across the board require you to have certain essentials. First and foremost, all ISOs are internationally recognized, right? All ISOs are internationally recognized. That is something to always remember. Second thing is that all ISOs require you to develop a management system with the involvement of the top level leadership. All ISOs require certain parameters for performance, whether it is environmental performance or whether it is employee health or whether it is anything else, whether it is even things like energy efficiency or occupational health and safety or quality or anything. that performance needs to be certified through certain standardized work instructions. Because ultimately, what is ISO? ISO is all documentation. That is to say, it is a set of work instructions that is very easy to replicate across the organization and which is aligned with the organization's broader goals. And in fact, it is for this that you need the involvement of organizational leadership. So we have seen what we require. We require documentation. We require a management system with certain performance parameters, with certain. जी रवि बताइए. अच्छा. We require certain performance parameters. We require certain the involvement of organizational leadership. रवि, आप कुछ कहना चाह रहे हैं? Hello. Okay. So we require certain performance parameters. I've muted Ravi, don't worry. So we require certain performance parameters, and we require them all to be this entire management system, and the organizational leadership, and the performance parameters, and the documentation must all be organized, must all be aligned with the organization's own strategic goals. So that is as far as 14,001 is concerned. We can see that the various branches or the various aspects of ISO 14,001. Which we can see is quite comprehensive. That is to say, it goes all the way from the organizational goals over here to individual performance evaluation over here. Let's explore that in just one more detail. But before I go forward, I'd just like to point out to you that ISO 14001 is the qualitative is the qualitative centerpiece of a large family of certifications, the 14,000 family, in which we can see that we have certain, in which we can see we can go in many different directions. We can go from 14,001 to things like policy organization, or we can go towards water management, waste management. We can go towards things like, for example, eco-friendly design. We can go in any of these various branches, and this is just a snapshot. We have so many others. Now, compare and contrast this with the Greenco rating. And we can see that in the Greenco rating, just for this one single certification, we require 8 to 10 different credits, right? Whereas the ISO 14001, which is covered by the entire ISO 14001 family of certifications. That is to say, the Greenco certification is basically not one certification, it is like 8 different certifications in one. It is like 8 different certifications that is treated as one. The ISO 14001 is a qualitative basis of what can later go on to become Greenco. Now, all ISOs are based. All ISOs are based on a Ptca cycle, right? all ISOs are based on a Ptca cycle. All ISOs are based on a Ptca cycle, which starts with planning, plan, do, check, and act. So planning, doing, check, and then the final step, or the final requirement is to act. So this is something that we are going to look at just now. The planning stage, as we can see, is involved. The planning stage involves, for example, we can see over here, it involves the formation of this environmental management system, and the formation of and an understanding of the organizational scope within which it can fit. And then on the basis of these two, what we have is what we are formulating is an environmental policy for our organization with the roles and responsibilities of various people already defined, right? With roles and responsibilities within the organization defined by the top level leadership. Once this is done, then we only then do we do things like setting environmental objectives or fixing various risks and opportunities. When we do this, then we are able to actually go ahead with the other aspects of the organization and go ahead with basically the formation of work instructions, documented information, and documented support systems for employee awareness, competence, etc., and of course internal communication within the organization. After that, we integrate this entire approach into the in a bottom-up manner to the day-to-day operations, to the day-to-day operations, as well as to emergency preparedness and emergency response. We are able to do both. Only then do we can we say that we are on the implementation track. And this is of course checked regularly with regular internal audits, regular management review meetings, regular performance evaluation. And then based on the results of these, what we get is certain NCs. All of you must have heard the term NC in the context of ISO. So so NCs, once these NCs are closed, then we can be said to be in a better position than we were when we started. And this is the ultimate goal. Continual improvement. This is what we are ultimately aiming for. And once this is done, we have completed one cycle. We have been able to implement this, and this, and then we can go around the loop again, and with PDCA again. Every step must result in continual improvement, and that is our ultimate goal. Any questions? Anyone has any questions, please?
No, sir.
Thank you. So again, we can see that the workflow in this entire thing is employee driven. Employee driven, of course, from bottom to top and from top to bottom, but ultimately it is employee driven. It is not an externally imposed requirement. That is why the first para of any ISO implementation manual states that it is voluntary. Even this that you can see over here, this entire flowchart is I have just lifted it from the ISO 14001 implementation manual, which is available for free online. So it is not as though it is anything very secret or very grand. It is all basically employee-driven workflow that has to be aligned with strategic business aims or strategic business goals. That is why we need the involvement of the top management to encourage better, in this case, environmental performance. It is basically a qualitative certification. ISO 14001 is basically a qualitative certification, not quantitative. And what I mean by that is, excuse me. So what I mean by that is that it involves more improvements that we may or may not be able to express in the form of things like numbers, maybe necessarily, but whose long-term benefits are apparent, and from which we and from that baseline we can go forward to any level. We can go forward for better confidence and a better public image. So that is as far as ISO 14001 is concerned. Let's take a look at ISO 50001. ISO 50001 is formed on roughly the same basis. That is to say, it has an energy management system that has to be formed with the involvement of the top level leadership, that is aligned with the rest of the continuous improvement over time. The difference is, first and foremost, that it is a data-driven approach. It is a quantitative certification, or it is a quantitative approach to energy management, in that everything needs to be measured. When you're talking about energy, you have to measure. And that is what we do in ISO 50001. So ultimately, the ISO 50001 is again based on the same Ptca cycle that 14001 is based on. That is to say, you start with a policy, you fix your targets for things like energy conservation or energy reduction. You gather data to understand where you are and to be able to make better decisions, and ultimately measure the results and see if you are see where you are effective. That is to say, review your NCs, your non-compliances or non-conformities, and once that is done, you improve energy management. So, and then of course the cycle will have to begin again. So it is so let's take a look. This is what the Ptca cycle looks like. Again, it is lifted from the implementation manual for 50001 that I downloaded online. So again, you have exactly the same thing that is happening in 14001. You form your energy management system, you involve top level leadership, you distribute roles and responsibilities, you make an energy policy and decide what your performance indicators will be. Most frequently, performance indicators are specific energy consumption, and you plan for documentation of all the data that you collect and all the steps that you have taken, and formalization of all the work instructions. Once that is done, then you are on the certification track once the planning stage is complete, in which you can start implementing this in your day-to-day work and day-to-day aspects of the organizational working, from operational planning to control to emergency measures to design to procurement to anything else. You conduct regular internal audits, and in the management review meeting, the MRM, what comes out is basically a set of parameters or a set of factors that need to be looked at again. They form the basis of what we later call NCs or non-conformities, which is basically certain problems in the system that remain despite implementing all of this. So once these are removed, then we can say that we have achieved continual improvement, or that we have achieved one cycle of improvement, and we can restart the process again. Because ultimately, as I said, the goal of ISO is continual improvement. Is there any question so far in 50,001? Anyone? Okay. So what we are looking at.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, what is
Yeah,
ISO/TC 301?
Yes, 1 second. You're asking about this, right?
Yes, yes.
This is the ISO chapter that deals with the continual energy performance, and that is basically the heart of 50,001. If you can buy an ISO manual or an ISO booklet, chapter 301 is basically the Bible of this 50,001. Every ISO has its own chapter number. So the way ISO, for example, if you go back to 14,001, you have here ISO TC 207. This is the governing book or the governing implementation manual of 14,000.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Anything else, please? Anyone? Okay. So we are looking at, of course, when we look at 50,001, because energy reduction, all energy that you consume has a certain cost associated with it. Electricity, diesel, petrol, compressed air, LPG, every form of energy that you consume has a certain cost associated with it. So through better energy management, you will be able to reduce your specific energy consumption and be able to reduce your costs or your energy bill. That is, of course, one thing. But the route by which the ISO does this, through staff participation, through employee training, through hand-holding with an external organization, through image building activities, through internal audits, and by a philosophy of continual improvement. The means by which we do this contributes greatly to many other aspects, like, for example, better morale among the staff, or better public image, or better overall coordination between departments. All of these aspects are good or are useful benefits of the ISO 50001 certification process. Anybody has any questions? Okay. Now I can go ahead with this for at least another 1.5 hours. This is actually, I mean, I generally teach this class in 2 parts: management certifications 1 and management certifications 2. Because so I have taught you the 3 main environment focused management certification. But I will be sharing with you this entire presentation, including things like 45,001, including things like IRIS certification, including things like 5S, including things like Six Sigma, including things like, and several others. But these are the main ones. And I will be sharing them all with you because we all are under a lot of pressure for various kinds of certifications in our different units. Somebody or the other is always working on some certification or the other. And it is a good thing to some extent, but it is only good if we have the support necessary to do it. And I think that this will help you all. One last thing I will state about ISO certification before I close the session is that all ISO is basically a because it is a voluntary framework. Therefore, technically, you do not the implementation manual of any of ISO, the Ptca cycle, never mentions that you have to enlist an external organization for ISO certification. We do not always have to hire somebody from outside to certify us. We can always use our own resources and our own expertise to self-certify. It is permitted under ISO. Unlike Greenco, which is needed, in which you need an external organization to certify you, in which you need an external, in which you need somebody from outside, basically, to certify you. You need to hire, you need to pay CII, or you need to pay IGBC to audit you and certify you. In no ISO do you need to pay anybody else to certify you. What we but we still do it because when we do it, then we are able to get some external handholding. We're able to get some external help from some other organization that can help us improve and that can help us audit, perform the audit, and then which can also basically help us implement the ISO PDCA process over the course of, let us say, 3 years until we need to recertify in a more effective manner than we might be able to do internally. That is why we hire an external organization, but it is not technically required. Anybody has any further questions, please? Anyone? Okay. In that case, let me close the. I'm going to leave the session. Thank you all very much for your time and for your questions that you asked during the session. And I hope that going forward we can keep meeting and we can keep discussing these matters. I will be sharing this presentation as well as the implementation manual, as well as the Greenco spreadsheet on the course page. All of you can download it. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All very
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
much. Please remain logged in. You have the next class after 15 minutes.